Morning in Cedar Ridge always felt like a slow breath, warm, dusty, scented with pine, and comforting in the way only small towns could be, Elijah. Beckett stood on the steps of the sheriff's office with a metal mug of coffee warming his hands. The steam drifted into the soft Wyoming sun as he watched golden light spill lazily over rooftops, still damp with dew. For a few precious minutes, the world behaved. Then the sky tore open. A thin silver crack appeared above Main Street, glowing like someone had sliced the air with a heated blade on. Elijah squinted, letting the bitter coffee settle on his tongue. He didn't panic. He rarely did. The universe threw strange things at Earth all the time. Wrong turns, confused warships, cosmic tourists with no manners. But this one felt different, aggressive, intentional. The crack widened into a spiraling wound, and from its shimmering edge descended a warship shaped like a giant metal crescent. Its hull shimmered with shifting symbols, cold, listen, smug. The kind of vessel that believed the galaxy belonged to it. Elijah sighed, more annoyed than afraid. Of all mornings, he muttered. Invaders really need a booking system. Cedar Ridge noticed too. The baker dropped a tray of biscuits. Two ranchers bolted for the feed barn. Sheriff Lansing burst out of the doorway behind Elijah, swearing loudly about never getting insurance for extraterrestrial nonsense. Ever again, Elijah just watched, still sipping. The ship landed with a roar that shook dust off old signs and rattled every window in town. Steel pedals folded outward, forming a ramp. Out marched a squad of tall, pale blue soldiers wearing segmented armor that reflected the sunlight like ice. They swept their gaze across the street as if the entire town was a disappointing exhibit. Elijah's grandmother walked out of the general store carrying a bag of flour. She stared up at the descending aliens with the same expression she used when judging bruised fruit. Elijah, she called, if those fellas dent my roof again, you tell them I keep a shotgun for uninvited guests. He raised his cup. Duly noted, Grandma. The aliens didn't wait. Soldiers fanned out, waving humming scan rods over buildings, horses, and unlucky citizens. One soldier jabbed a magnifying tool at the bakery sign like it was a cultural offense. Another poked a horse, which promptly bit him. The alien scream echoed through the entire county. Elijah hid a smile. Shouldn't poke buck without permission. More townsfolk were rounded up with buzzing prods, herded toward the street center like frightened cattle. A kid cried as a soldier yanked her away from her mother. A dog barked and was stunned silent. An old man collapsed. Fear began to spread. Elijah put his cup down. That tiny decision, the gentle placement of a coffee mug, was the quiet shift inside him, the one he didn't like to wake. He stepped forward. The officer floating toward him rode a grav disc and carried the smugness of someone who'd never been told no. Local beings, it announced, voice booming unnaturally. You stand before the Kixian Empire. Remain still while we evaluate your biological value. Elijah's tone was calm. You ever thought of introducing yourselves with a handshake instead of a threat? The officer ignored him. Elijah watched as soldiers shoved families apart. His grandmother tried swatting a scan rod away with her purse. They grabbed her roughly. Elijah's jaw tensed. He moved closer. Let them go. You are in no position to request anything, the officer said. Your species is suitable for testing you. In particular, show atypical neural readings. You will make an excellent specimen. Elijah smiled pleasantly, too pleasantly. Trust me, you really don't want to take me. And why not? He tapped a small silver keychain in his pocket. A faint beep sounded. The officer stiffened. What did you activate? Nothing dangerous, Elijah said lightly. Just a reminder. The ship's engines flared. A new squad marched out, dragging townsfolk, including his grandmother, toward the ramp. Elijah, she shouted, don't let these long-necked cranes take me. I'm working on it. The officer leveled a glowing baton. Step onto the ship, human resist, and we will erase this settlement. Elijah exhaled slowly. All right, take me, but release the children and elders. A brief hesitation, then a nod. Elijah walked up the ramp willingly, calm as a Sunday walk. But inside, the switch had fully flipped, and the Kixian Empire had just made the worst mistake in its history. Inside the alien vessel, the air smelled sterile, like cold metal, chemicals, and the faint ozone of machinery built with no concern for comfort. The ramp sealed shut behind Elijah with a metallic thud that echoed through the long corridor. He didn't fight, didn't raise his voice, didn't so much as clench his fists. His heartbeat stayed calm, steady, measured. To the Kixian guards escorting him, that steadiness was unnatural. They expected fear. Instead, they got a man who looked like he was waiting for a train. The ship vibrated as it climbed into the clouds. Through the small viewing slit, Elijah watched Cedar Ridge shrink to a collection of tiny rooftops and fading dust trails. He searched for one familiar figure among the case. His grandmother tied to a restraint column. Even from a distance, he could tell she was yelling curse words the translator would never recognize. A soldier nudged him with the barrel of a humming weapon. Keep moving, lesser mammal. Elijah smiled pleasantly. You know, hospitality is universal. You could at least offer me a mint. They shoved him harder. The aliens marched him through dim metal corridors lit by veins of pulsing blue light. The deeper they went, the more humming vibrations surrounded them. Ship engines, containment fields, distant machinery, the cold heart of an empire used to stealing whatever it wanted. Eventually, the corridor opened into a central chamber. Massive windows looked out into the streaking blur of hyperspace. The sight was violent and beautiful. Twisted hues ripping past like storms trapped in glass. Elijah blinked once. Hyperspace travel always felt to him like being rattled inside a giant freezer full of angry bees, but he kept that thought to himself. The lead officer from Cedar Ridge floated toward him on his grav disc, armor shimmering in the neon glow. You remain disturbingly calm, the alien said. Fear is expected, panic is normal, yet your pulse remains unaltered. Sorry, Elijah replied with a shrug. I'd panic, but I left that emotion back on Earth next to my laundry. The officer clicked its mandibles in irritation. Minutes later, the ship tore free of hyperspace. A swirl of white towers and floating platforms filled the viewport, lit by a molten gold star rising behind them, Varkon Prime. Capital of the Kixian Empire, a world built to intimidate. Elijah exhaled softly. Pretty skyline, bit dramatic, but pretty. The aliens didn't appreciate his commentary. They guided him down a docking bridge bustling with soldiers, scientists, and armored elites. Hundreds of eyes watched him like he was a rare animal. Whispered discussions circled about his neural anomalies, his biological potential, his species' irritating resilience. Elijah greeted them with a polite nod each time. It only made them more unsettled. He was led into enormous obsidian corridors carved with the glowing glyphs. Screens displayed propaganda. Kixian fleets conquering small planets. Crowds kneeling. Entire sectors turning red under imperial borders. Pride. Arrogance. Weak points, all of them. Finally, they reached massive double doors taller than a starship wing. They split open with a low rumble, revealing the Council Chamber. 27 species sat, or hovered, in a colossal arena of platforms encircling a pit of swirling mist. Every shape imaginable, crystalline figures, floating jelly forms, insectoid giants, tentacled elders. At the top sat the Kixian High Chancellor, draped in living armor that rippled like liquid glass. Human, the Chancellor boomed, voice vibrating the floor. You stand before the Empire Council to answer for your species' insolence. Elijah stepped forward into the mist, hands behind his back. My pleasure to be here. Lovely decor. Smells like fear and furniture polish. A few delegates hissed, a few recoiled. One snorted in amusement. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. State your identity. Elijah Beckett, Earth Defense Liaison, part-time coffee maker. I also do well at crossword puzzles. Ripples of irritation circled the chamber. You have been captured for study, a reptilian council member rasped. Your bodies belong to us. Elijah smiled, barely a millimeter shift. But inside him, a storm tightened. That's unfortunate, he said softly, because I came to retrieve my people. The chamber erupted in laughter, snorts, growls, mechanical clicks, crystalline rattles. The Chancellor leaned forward. You demand the return of specimens? They're not specimens, Elijah said. They're farmers, teachers, ranchers. One of them is my grandmother. She bakes a mean cherry pie and will absolutely stab someone with a knitting needle if provoked. And what, the Chancellor sneered, gives you the right to make demands? Elijah tapped the small device on his wrist, the same one linked to that keychain back on Earth. Oh, he said, smiling pleasantly, I don't make demands. The lights flickered. The mist pulsed a sudden electric blue. Outside the window, streaks of eerie blue light began appearing around the skyline, tiny cracks forming in the air. Widening Varkon Prime's delegates froze. What is happening? A crystalline envoy whispered. Elijah glanced up, tone calm as snowfall. That's the reminder I mentioned. One by one, the cracks blossomed open, and human warships stepped through. The first rupture widened above a Varkon Prime like a blooming wound in the fabric of space. From its swirling blue edge emerged a matte black warship, sleek, silent, and predatory. It glided into the capital's airspace without sound, without hesitation, without fear. The council chamber froze. The next gate flickered open. Another ship emerged, then another, then dozens more. Each human vessel slid through reality like it owned the right to exist wherever it pleased. Panic spread through the chamber in a wave of color and noise. Clicking tendrils, flaring wings, crackling energy sacs. You dare bring a fleet to our capital world? A Kixian general shouted. Oh, Elijah said with a pleasant smile. This isn't the fleet, just the polite portion. A crystalline delegate trembled so violently its joints clattered together. They're ships. They form a ring around the entire planet. The High Chancellor slammed his staff against the floor. Human, deactivate your vessels at once, Elijah tilted his head. You're shouting at the wrong guy. I don't command them. I just sent an invitation. The council erupted again. Fear, anger, disbelief mixing like a storm. Screens lit up across the chamber, each showing a different part of the sky now crowded with human warships. Their hulls glowed with restrained power, energy lines pulsing like sleeping giants stretching. A Talzuri elder, translucent and delicate, floated closer. There is sorrow in your voice, human. Sorrow, not hatred. That is far more dangerous. Elijah bowed his head respectfully. Sorrow remembers, sorrow doesn't forgive, and sometimes sorrow calls home. The Chancellor gestured sharply. Show him the specimens. The wall behind Elijah shimmered into transparency. Inside containment pods floated the captured humans, awake, furious, terrified. Men, women, children, and at the far end, his grandmother. Still cursing, still kicking the restraints, Elijah's jaw tightened so subtly that only the oldest species in the room noticed. They are unharmed. For now, the Chancellor said. Elijah folded his hands behind his back. That's good. I get very irritated when harm comes to my family. A reptilian envoy snarled. You are surrounded. Your threats mean nothing. Threats? Elijah echoed softly. No, this is a courtesy call. Before anyone could question him, alarms erupted across the chamber. Lights flickered. Data screens shattered into static. The ground trembled like it was caught between two opposing timelines. What disturbance is this? The Chancellor roared. Elijah checked his wrist device as casually as someone checking the weather. Oh, right on time. I was worried they'd hit traffic. The mist swirling around his feet suddenly glowed electric blue, lighting up the chamber from below. Outside, the ring of human ships shifted, repositioning, aligning. Their hulls unfolded like opening machines, forming long interlocking structures. They're creating a halo, a Kixian technician screamed. A harmonic field, planetary scale. The Chancellor's eyes widened with dawning horror. No, that is impossible. Humans cannot wield gravity anchors. Elijah shrugged. We couldn't, but we learned. The first pulse hit. A perfect circular ripple expanded across the sky, clear, silent, and absolute. Every aerial vehicle froze midair. Every cannon, turret, and missile platform died instantaneously. Weapons went dark. Defense grids collapsed like wet paper, and yet not a single living being was harmed. A Kixian general clutched his useless command badge. How did you disable all systems without an EMP? Elijah tapped his wrist device. We upgraded past EMPs. Those fry biology. We don't like unnecessary casualties. This is more like a very stern finger wag. The Chancellor shook with rage and fear. Release our systems, human. I will, Elijah said quietly, as soon as my people are back where they belong. The council hall plunged into chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Security forces tried rebooting their equipment. The great screens showed city districts flickering with powerless silence. Then the room darkened. Every council member looked up. Above the palace, the largest gate blossomed open, 10 times wider than the others. Its edges sparked like a newborn star, and through it came something enormous. Something slow, something ancient-looking in design and terrifying in power. The human flagship, a fortress of matte black steel, engines humming like restrained thunder, armored plates shifting like a beast rousing from sleep. Painted on the hull in bold white letters, USS Betty White. Elijah grinned softly. That one's a personal favorite. Never underestimate anything named after an American grandmother. A Kixian officer choked on his own breath. This is an act of war. Oh no, Elijah said. War would be messy. This is just a demonstration. The flagship began unfolding a massive spiraling device along its belly. Glowing gold and cobalt delegates recoiled in terror. The Talzuri elder whispered, This human, he orchestrates, not negotiates. Elijah gave a soft nod. Empires shouldn't steal from frontier towns. The spiraling device ignited reality bent. And the world of Varkon Prime realized it was no longer the one holding power. The spiraling device beneath the USS Betty White spun faster, its rings rotating in layers, one clockwise, one counterclockwise, one shifting in ways that defied simple geometry. Golden and cobalt light pulsed through the chamber windows, bathing every alien face in shifting color. The entire palace vibrated. Delegates clutched railings, each one feeling the quiet dread of a predator, bigger than them, stirring awake. Some species hissed in terror, others whispered prayers to ancient gods. A few stared at Elijah the way prey stares at a calm wolf. The High Chancellor forced his trembling legs to stand. What weapon have you brought upon our world? He demanded. Elijah didn't answer immediately. He turned, watching the device unfold like a giant blooming flower. Then he said softly, Oh, that's not a weapon. It's a conversation starter. The Chancellor's face darkened. Before he could speak, the palace floor shuddered, deep and cold. Like the heartbeat of something buried beneath the planet's crust, cracks raced across the obsidian tiles, glowing faintly with blue light. A beam erupted upward from the center of the city. Not fire, not plasma. A tall column of pale energy, clean, elegant, controlled, connecting the buried device to the flagship overhead. Screams filled the hall. A young Kixian technician stared at her flickering console. It's not a bomb, she whispered in horror. It's a relocation engine. They're linking our planet to their anchor array. A ripple of panic tore through the chamber. Relocation? A crystalline envoy shrieked. As in, moving the world. Elijah finally turned back to the Chancellor. Plan A was diplomacy, he said. Plan B was asking nicely. He gestured toward the glowing beam. And this? This is Plan C. Above Varkon Prime, the human fleet formed a perfect ring, each ship locking into the next through arcs of shimmering energy like a celestial chain, like a planetary leash. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the Betty White, eyes fixed on the readouts. Stabilizer is charged, her second-in-command reported. All ships synchronized. Harmonic field at 92%. Reyes nodded once. Begin the lift. Keep it clean. Back in the council hall, Elijah's wrist device chimed. He sighed, almost apologetic. I did try warning you. The world moved. Not violently, not explosively, but with a controlled, terrifying grace. The palace rose 1 meter. Then another. Outside, whole districts lifted like drifting platforms. Oceans bulged upward. Riverbeds bent. Floating towers actually floated. Alien delegates screamed as gravity loosened its grip like a hand unclenching. This is impossible, a Kixian commander cried. We're not destroying anything, Elijah said calmly. We're just relocating your planet away from Earth's neighborhood. Consider it A boundary adjustment. The Chancellor stared at him in shaking disbelief. You would move an entire world? You moved my people first, Elijah replied. That's what started this. He took one step closer to the Chancellor, voice dropping to something almost gentle. You stole farmers, grandparents, children. You thought Earth was small. You assumed we wouldn't answer. A tremor cracked the floor again. This time more violently, a dozen aliens fell to their knees. Your first mistake, Elijah continued quietly, was believing we wouldn't come for them. And your second mistake, he glanced up at the spiraling device, was forcing us to prove it. Suddenly a guard screamed from the side platform, the captives, their pods are empty. The Chancellor whirled around. Where humans had floated moments ago, only drifting smoke remained. The restraints hung open. The life sign monitors blinked blank. Elijah clasped his hands behind his back. Teleported to our fleet, he said softly. They're safe. The Chancellor staggered backward, breath shaking. You planned every step of this. Elaborate planning is kind of our thing. Elijah smiled faintly. Humans solve puzzles for fun, and your empire was a puzzle with very sharp corners. A wave of energy rolled through the halls, the stabilizer pulsed. Half the city beyond the windows dissolved, not violently, not destructively, but into swirling particles of golden light, a clean conversion, a painless transition. Where are you sending us? The Chancellor rasped. Elijah's expression softened, not cruel but resolute. Not you personally, just the planet. He exhaled, to a star system far away. Hot, very bright, very empty. You can start over without bothering anyone. You would erase our world. Erase? Elijah echoed. No, relocate. The Talzuri elder collapsed, whispering, he smiles while ending an empire. Elijah crouched slightly, speaking so quietly only nearby delegates heard, you ended a town. A long silence filled the chamber. Then the Chancellor broke. We surrender, he cried. Return our gravity. Restore our systems. We yield the empire. Elijah pressed one button. The stabilizer froze mid-pulse. Golden particles hung in the air like suspended snow. The city stopped rising. The planet waited. Elijah stepped forward and offered the Chancellor a small, respectful nod. Good choice. But then, his wrist device chimed, a deep, unfamiliar tone. Elijah's eyes narrowed. That's not ours. The floor lurched violently. Lights flared crimson. A low roar rose from deep below the surface. The Chancellor gasped. What? What have you done? Elijah's face changed for the first time, not calm, not confident, concerned. We didn't activate that, he murmured. He looked down as the tremor grew stronger. And that, he whispered, is a much bigger problem. The vibration beneath the palace deepened, no longer a controlled hum from the human stabilizer, but something older, heavier, echoing like a beast dragging chains in the dark. Dust drifted from the vaulted ceiling. Columns trembled. The mist at Elijah's feet rippled with violent distortion. Every alien in the chamber froze. This was not human. This was not part of the demonstration. This was something the Kixian Empire had been hiding. Elijah's calm expression tightened. Chancellor, he murmured, what exactly is buried under your capital? The Chancellor's mandibles shook, his entire body convulsing with fear, not of Elijah, not of the human fleet, but of something beneath them. We sealed it away centuries ago, the Chancellor stammered. It cannot be waking. It cannot. The floor bucked violently, cutting him off. A deep boom echoed through the entire palace like a giant heartbeat slamming against stone walls. Elijah regained his footing instantly. Aliens tumbled like children dropped into a storm. The palace lights flickered, then died. Crimson emergency beacons lit the chamber in pulses. A soft creaking spread through the ground. Like the world itself was stretching, Elijah spoke to the Chancellor with a deadly calm. What did your people bury? The Chancellor's voice cracked. A seed, a fail-safe, a guardian. Elijah's eyes narrowed. Guardian of what? Of us, the Chancellor cried. A weapon, one that awakens only if our world is in mortal danger. Elijah looked around slowly. Well, Good news and bad news. He gestured upward. Good news, we weren't going to destroy your planet. He pointed downward. Bad news, whatever you planted down there didn't get the memo. A violent quake hurled several delegates from their platforms. One alien, crystalline and shimmering, shattered on the floor with a piercing screech. The glowing beam connecting Earth's stabilizer to the buried device flickered wildly, not because of the humans, but because the planet was resisting. A Kixian officer stumbled toward the Chancellor. Sir, the core is destabilizing. It's drawing energy from the human harmonic field, feeding off it. Elijah's eyes widened. That's not good. The palace windows cracked outward, spiderwebbing from the force. Outside, cities continued hovering midair, but now tilting, bending, sagging as if something inside the planet was trying to tear free. Admiral Reyes saw the readout spike across her screens. Sir, her deputy whispered, the planet's internal energy signature just tripled. Reyes tightened her jaw. That's not planetary physics. That's something alive. Back in the council hall, the floor split wide. A blast of icy blue light erupted upward like a reverse thunderbolt. Blasting debris into the air, delegates screamed. Kixian soldiers were thrown into walls. The Chancellor was knocked off his dais. Elijah shielded his face from the spray of dust, then lowered his arm, eyes fixed on the new rift. Something glowed beneath the palace. Something massive. Something mechanical, yet alive. Rotating rings similar to the human stabilizer, but older, jagged and raw. A core of shifting tendrils. A huge pulsing eye of plasma in the center. The Kixians had not buried a device. They had buried a machine god. A planetary defender built in a forgotten era. One designed to protect the Empire no matter the cost. It was waking. The Chancellor crawled toward Elijah, voice trembling. You must deactivate your field. The Guardians seize your fleet as invaders. It will tear your ships from the Elijah looked down at him. That is extremely inconvenient. The Guardians' energy surged again. A wave of blue force blasted upward. Glass shattered. Platforms collapsed. And above the planet, the entire human fleet rocked violently. Alarms shrieked across Admiral Reyes's bridge. Stabilizer integrity dropping. Gravity anchor distortion rising. Massive energy signature rising from below the crust. It's targeting our formation. Reyes clenched her fist. Brace the fleet. Keep the harmonic field steady. Her deputy shook his head. If that thing keeps rising, it'll tear the entire planet in half and drag our ships with it. Back in the palace, the Guardian's plasma eye flickered open for the first time in thousands of years. Its gaze locked directly onto Elijah. A low, alien growl reverberated through the chamber, more felt than heard. Elijah stared back at it, expression unreadable. Great, he muttered. Now the ancient death machine is looking at me. The Chancellor screamed, Human, save us! Elijah raised one eyebrow. You're asking me for help? Please. Another quake hit, throwing everyone to the ground. Elijah stood slowly, brushing dust off his coat. Well, he sighed, since I started this mess. He looked up at the roaring alien Guardian. I guess I should help finish it. He tapped his wrist device. Reyes, it's Elijah. Prep something big. Static crackled. Elijah, Reyes replied. How big? He exhaled slowly, watching the Guardian rise. Big enough to put a god back to sleep. The alien Guardian tore itself free from the crust of Varkon Prime in a storm of blue plasma and shattered stone. Towering metallic tendrils unfolded like the limbs of an awakened titan. Its core burned with the intensity of a newborn star, and its first full roar rippled through the planet, shaking cities apart. The chamber shook so hard the platforms collapsed one by one, sending delegates scrambling. A few fell into the crater below, disappearing into the machine's rising glow. Elijah remained standing. Rock dust swirled around him like fog panels crashed. Sparks rained from above. The Guardian dragged itself upward, a god forged in metal and ancient wrath, built for one purpose: destroy anything that threatened the Kixian Empire, including humans. The Chancellor crawled to Elijah, sobbing. If it rises fully, he cried, it will kill us all. It will destroy your fleet, shut down your stabilizer. Elijah knelt beside him, voice steady. You buried a world killer under your throne room, and you're surprised it bites? We thought, the Chancellor trembled, we thought only an external enemy would wake it. Well, Elijah said, watching the Titan rise, you got your wish. A massive claw of glowing alloy erupted through the palace floor. With a single swipe, it tore a spire clean off the building. Light poured through the jagged wound. Through it, the human fleet hovered in perfect formation. Beautiful, orderly, vulnerable. The Guardian's eye locked onto them, and it screamed. A beam of raw, tearing energy blasted into the sky. Admiral Reyes's bridge rattled violently. Guardian energy strike incoming! Shields collapsing! Harmonic field destabilizing. Reyes braced herself against the console. Divert all auxiliary power. Keep the anchor network intact. Outside, the human ships struggled to hold position as the planet's ancient weapon dragged their formation out of sync. Back in the crumbling council hall, Elijah made his decision. He tapped his wrist device. Reyes, give me a direct line. Static buzz, then, Elijah, she responded, please tell me you have a plan that doesn't end with everyone dying. He squinted up at the Guardian tearing through the palace ceiling. Well, define everyone. Elijah, he sighed. Look, you remember Project Backstep? Reyes froze. Absolutely not. That prototype was never field tested. Yeah, Elijah said, rolling his shoulders. But every good crisis deserves a terrible idea. The Guardian's plasma eye focused directly on Elijah. The floor cracked under its weight. Entire city blocks outside floated, tilted, and trembled as gravity warbled. Towers collapsed in slow motion upward, as if falling toward the stars. Elijah, Reyes said sharply, if you trigger backstep inside an active planetary core, it'll reset the Guardian's neural lattice. He said, put it back to sleep. It could also rip you to atoms. Elijah exhaled. That's also true. The Guardian slammed another tendril through the floor, straight toward him. He jumped back as the ground exploded. Reyes, he said calmly, I'm sending you the sequence. He tapped the keychain still clipped to his belt, the one he used earlier. A soft chime responded. The Guardian paused. For the first time, its roar faltered. Elijah looked up at the glowing, swirling mass of alien machinery towering over him. You hear me? He called. We're not enemies, but you're hurting my people, and I don't allow that. The Guardian's limbs flared brighter. Charging another blast, Elijah whispered, Reyes, now. From orbit, a piercing beam shot down from the USS Betty White. Not an attack, but a precisely coded pulse. The backstep sequence compressed into pure light. The beam struck Elijah's keychain. The device amplified it, exploding into an expanding wave of gold-white energy. The Guardian froze. Its limbs locked mid-swing. The plasma core dimmed to a deep ember. Cracks crawled across its framing as the wave rewrote its ancient instructions. Then, with a sound like a sigh the size of a continent, its stoplights died. Tendrils sagged. Its vast body folded like a collapsing star, sinking back into the crater, descending gently, almost peacefully, into the planet's mantle silence. True silence. Admiral Reyes's voice came through the wrist device breathless. Elijah, are you alive? Elijah looked down at the smoking remains of the keychain. His clothes were scorched, his boots half melted. A gash bled down his arm, but he was smiling. Yeah, he said, I think it liked the lullaby. The palace, what remained of it, fell into stunned quiet. Delegates stared at Elijah as though witnessing a ghost. The Chancellor whispered, You saved us. No, Elijah corrected softly. I saved everyone. That's different. He walked to the shattered window, staring down at the city, suspended in glowing dust, broken yet still surviving. He tapped his wrist device once more. Reyes, he said, bring the captured citizens home. Restore gravity. Let the planet rest. Copy that, she answered. The human fleet withdrew its harmonic field. The floating districts drifted gently back into place. The golden particles settled like snow. Elijah turned toward the Chancellor. We're done here, he said. Earth expects you to honor your surrender. The Chancellor bowed his head. We will. Elijah nodded once. Then with a soft sigh, he added, and stop abducting small towns. My grandmother's very angry. Trust me, you'd rather face the Guardian.